Intellectual property waiver for COVID vaccines. United States Trade Representative Katherine said the US will pursue text-based negotiations on the waiver at the World Trade Organization. The United States on Wednesday announced support for waiving intellectual property protection for COVID-19 vaccines, saying extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary measures. United States Trade Representative Katherine said the US will pursue text-based negotiations on the waiver at the World Trade Organization. Text-based negotiations involve negotiators exchanging text with their preferred wording and then thrashing out a consensus on the working, a fairly long-drawn affair. Negotiations are expected in a mix of virtual and in-person meetings. They will take time given the consensus-based nature of the institution and the complexity of the issues involved. All 164 WTO members must agree on the draft and any one member can veto it. The European Union, which had earlier opposed the waiver, has now stated its intent to discuss the US-backed proposal. So what does the IP waiver mean? The IP waiver might open up space for production of COVID vaccines with emergency use authorization, such as those developed by Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Novavax, Johnson & Johnson and Bharat Biotech on a large scale in the middle-income countries. Most production is currently concentrated in high-income countries. Production by middle-income countries has been happening through licensing or technology transfer agreement. Ramping up production capacities will be a lengthy process, a reason being cited by pharmaceutical companies against the move. Most analysts expect this to take at least a few months. It is likely that the agreement will be targeted by the WTO's next ministerial conference in end November. The US support for IP waiver stems from a proposal by India and South Africa in the WTO last year. The proposal had, however, called for a waiver on all COVID interventions, including testing, diagnostics, and novel therapeutics. Experts said IP waiver proposal should include other interventions going forward. Amid the pandemic, the widest possible access to this intervention is limited by production capacities as well as propensity of high-income countries to acquire most of the supplies. Public Health Foundation of India President Professor K. Srinath Reddy said countries including Canada, South Korea and Bangladesh have shown interest in making COVID vaccine if they can get a patent waiver, Professor Reddy said. So what are the deterrents for the waiver? In a joint letter to US President Joe Biden in March, pharma companies including Pfizer and AstraZeneca had opposed the waiver, saying eliminating IP protections would undermine the global response to the pandemic, including the ongoing efforts to tackle new variants. It could also create confusion that could potentially undermine the public confidence in vaccine safety and create a barrier to information sharing, they had said, and most importantly, eliminating protections would not speed up production. Microsoft founder Bill Gates expressed reservations against tweaking IP rules, saying COVID-19 vaccine technology, the thing that's holding things back in this case is not intellectual property. It's not like there's some idle vaccine factory with a regulatory approval that makes magically safe vaccines, Gates said in a recent interview to Sky News. His justification for not sharing vaccine tech with developing countries is that it not be feasible for a company to move vaccines to developing nations. Gates mentioned India and said that even if the transfer were to happen, it is because our grants and expertise. The arguments that those countries do not have the capacity to speedily produce vaccine goes against earlier moves towards a patent regime for generic drugs. Experts said the same reasoning can be used now for the production of vaccines. They will question the capacity and quality, but a number of companies from different countries have said that they are ready to produce and quality can always be assessed. Between 1972 to 2005, India had adopted process patenting rather than product patenting and built up huge generic industry. Western companies are interested in contracting Indian companies for manufacturing the vaccines in India. Then how can they say you do not have the quality to produce on your own? Professor Reddy said. So what are patents and IP rights? A patent represents a powerful intellectual property right in an exclusive monopoly granted by a government to an inventor for a limited pre-specified time. It provides an enforceable legal rights to prevent others from copying an intervention. Patents can be either process patents or product patents. A product patent ensures that the right to the final product is protected and anyone other than the patent holder can be restrained from manufacturing it during a specified period, even if they are to use different process. A process patent enables any person other than the patent holder to manufacture the patent product by modifying certain process in the manufacturing exercises. India moved from product patenting to process patenting in 1970s, which enabled India to become significant producer of generic drugs at global scale and allowed companies like Cipla to provide Africa and with anti-HIV drugs in the 1990s. But due to obligations arising out of the TRIPS agreement, India had to amend the Patents Act in 2005 and switch to a product patent regime across the pharma, chemicals, and biotech sectors. So, besides patent, what are the other roadblocks to scaling up production? The International Federation of Pharmaceutical Manufacturers and Associations has pointed to other real challenges in scaling up production and distribution of COVID 19 vaccines. These include trade barriers, bottlenecks in supply chain, scarcity of raw materials and ingredients in the supply chain, and the unwillingness of rich countries to share doses with poorer nations. The scarcity of raw materials has been a growing issue for ramping up production. Several manufacturers have been relying on specific suppliers and alternatives are limited. Also, countries like the US had blocked exports of critical raw materials used in the production of some COVID 19 vaccine using regulations like the American Defense Production Act. This led to a delay in the production of COVID vaccines by some companies in India. Mahima Datal, Managing Director Biological E, which is making J&J vaccine in India, he said that have told global clients they may not be able to fulfill their order because of the act, according to a reporter in the Financial Times. Vaccine makers such as Adar Poonawalla of Serum Institute of India had said that the use of DPA had blocked exports of plastic bag, filters, and certain media used in the production of its version of Novavax vaccine. On April 25, the White House said that the US had identified sources of specific raw material that were urgently required for the manufacture of Covishield, SSI's version of the AstraZeneca vaccine, and they would be immediately made available for India.